All right, and we're live. So we were sorry for everybody who missed it. We were shooting the shit here for probably 30 minutes before we even went live. But anyway, we're talking about Alex Jones here and his trial. And I want everybody to listen to this 1 minute and 35 seconds of video here.
I heard him say what Alex Jones said was reckless. I mean, we know that already from what the court has given, what the court has charged you with. We know that they are reckless, that Alex Jones and what he said was reckless. We know that it was intentional.
I don't even like that it's insinuation that we know that it was reckless just based upon what the court has charged you with. Like, isn't that not why they're here to determine that? Anyway, we'll keep going.
All right, but but think about this Alex Jones representative saying, I know he was reckless. Alex knows he was reckless. And then immediately going, but Megan Kelly said, but the truthers said, but there were other websites, but
the truther said, like, I mean, it's like he's arguing with somebody on Twitter.
Yeah, exactly. It's
It's
it definitely
anyway.
it sounds like he's resorting to tabloid news, it's something that you would hear on CNN.
I think in a trial about Alex Jones, you'd almost have to, right? I mean,
Yeah, I guess.
I don't know. Anyway, we'll keep going.
Hillary Clinton. Hell, at one point I thought he was going to start yelling or chanting, lock her up. I mean, when's it going to be over with from that side?
And that's what it is. When's it going to be over with that side? Like, it cannot be any more obvious. This is just a political ploy against Alex Jones.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is just a part of simply just a part of the narrative of the ploy against Trump, right? I mean,
yeah, well, it certainly grants some validity, or to essentially the narrative that these cases are more political. And it unfortunately also kind of casts some doubt on whether or not they're in good faith for the stated causes. That's to say, are they actually coming after Jones because he is such a monster, or maybe there's some legitimacy to some of the things he's been saying, and this is the easiest way to knock him out. He screwed the pooch on this one, and this is where they get him.
well, we know that
Um,
there's some legitimacy to his claim about the Clintons and Epstein. I mean, which we'll watch that here in just a minute if you guys want. But
yeah, yeah, for sure. But then it raises questions too about Trump.
yeah,
I actually heard, I saw a headline. I haven't looked into it. That the DOJ is talking about releasing the actual um, warrant that they had that they used for the Mar-a-Lago raid, if you will. So maybe that'll show something. But at this point, like I said last time we streamed, unless they have something more than just those documents, then it's an obvious political ploy. But recently on The Hills Rising, Brianna um, Joy Gray said that it made a very compelling point, stating that historically the FBI's been uh, okay. Are you there?
yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Well, I thought we got disconnected for a second there. I lost the stream.
Oh, sorry, here.
Yeah, no worries. So like she made a good point. She said historically the FBI has been used for political interest. I mean, they've used the FBI against obviously Martin Luther King Jr. is one of the best examples of abuses with it. I mean, there are tons of other ones.
Malcolm X that we talked about last time.
Right, right. Well, in MLK, they tried to blackmail him. They tried to um they actually sent him a letter telling him to like kill himself and shit like that. Like,
they just sent him mean tweets.
right, right. So I mean, like, it's not like she made a compelling point to say that it's always been political, and I think there's probably a truth to that. What I find interesting though is political to whom. When we start talking about the deep state, the fabric of the deep state is predicated on the ability for people in different positions of the intelligence community to be able to maintain their position regardless of who's in office.
Yep.
And so, they looked into Hillary Clinton, that could have just been optics. But nevertheless, they did. And so, I mean, to me, it's like it's an interesting conversation. It definitely seems political, and there's not going to be any way around that. If it's oh, we had some documents, like come on, like that's what the FBI is spending their resources on.
Yeah, and it's not like oh shoot, I forgot what I was going to say.
It's all good.
Oh man, I can't remember. Anyway, let's watch I want to watch Alex Jones tell about the Clintons. Hold on.
I've marked his claims to exhibit 1.
Oh, that's gold. I saw that on the
That man's
Facebook
name is
page.
Robert Barnes.
Yes.
Okay. That's InfoWars? Okay.
Yes.
He was. You say, Mr. Jones, that you're taking these court proceedings seriously. You're approaching them in good faith. But the truth of the matter is, you've been broadcasting repeatedly a picture of our judge on fire, haven't you?
Objection compound, Your Honor.
No.
You have to wait till the court rules.
Oh.
Objection, and Alex is like, no. And then his lawyer's like, bro, you gotta wait.
Ruled. There was a statement and then a question.
Mr. Jones, I'm going to hand you what I've marked as plaintiff's exhibit 129. That's from your show, isn't it?
That's Justice on Fire.
Huh, okay. That's from your show, isn't it?
Yes, I haven't seen this.
And you've been running this video repeatedly, haven't
Well, that's clearly a lie, Alex. Come on.
you?
No,
You've clearly seen the picture of the judge on fire.
Yep.
I've not been there all the time.
You haven't been there a lot of the time. You've been there every day this last week, haven't you? Every single day.
No, I taped some of the shows. I've been there today.
Your Honor, I'd like to move 130 to 129 into evidence.
Is this impeachment evidence? I'm not exactly sure what Mr. Bankston wants to do with.
I think he wants to impeach Mr. Jones with it.
Does he want to introduce it? Is it just to show to the jury, or does he want it to
No, I
go
think
into evidence?
I'm first moving to
Moved it
admit it as
into
evidence.
evidence. He's moving that it be accepted into evidence. Do you have an objection?
Yes, Your Honor.
What is the legal objection?
401, 403.
Can I see it, please?
Yes, you may, Your Honor.
Plaintiff's 129 is admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. Can you display 129? Do you have the ability?
There's the
The person
picture
on
of
the
her
left
on
of this
fire.
image is our judge, correct?
Yes.
The
It looks like
person on
something
the
from
right
like
is
a
another judge who's
70s
our right?
alt rock kind of thing.
Yeah. There's going to be a wizard come up here in a minute.
One of the things you can take that down. One of the things you've been talking about a lot recently on your show, even within the past couple months, is your allegation that government officials are aiding in pedophilia, child trafficking, and the grooming of children, right?
You mean like what Jeffrey Epstein did with the Clintons?
And there it is. I really hope they have to get more into this. Like, I would love nothing more than to see all of this bullshit exposed.
Sure, if that's a yes, is that a yes?
Yeah. Same.
Yes.
Okay. And on Thursday, you and InfoWars started connecting those allegations to our judge, didn't you?
No.
In fact, Mr. Jones, you're telling the world not to believe what happens in this courtroom because the judge worked with Child Protective Services who you say is involved with pedophilia and child trafficking, correct?
Not all of it, but it's the Texas Youth Commission got caught doing it a lot. There's been a lot of that here.
I'm not asking you that, Mr. Jones. I'm asking you, you're telling the world not to believe what's happened in this trial because this judge is involved with CPS, who is working with child traffickers and pedophilia, correct?
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time, we would like to show a clip from Mr. Jones' show on Thursday where those words are said.
Foreign people.
That's pretty much it. Honestly, I haven't really been keeping up with the Alex Jones trial, but I probably ought to.
Yeah, no doubt. I haven't either. This is just the clips that you've shared on Facebook mostly. Ah, yep.
Honestly, I'd like to see this happen. You know, more
I
transparency
agree.
would be nice.
Yeah, well, I mean, my general policy with government is transparency is best regardless. But in this particular case, we're talking about something that's unprecedented. Now, if the FBI is going to invade a former president, that's kind of a big deal, like his residence, especially when you consider, if you look back on it, remember that a lot of people were calling for George Bush to be prosecuted as a war criminal. And Obama took a position which was essentially, we're not looking in the past, we're looking forward. And so we're going to like let it slide and just move on and not focus on that kind of thing, which is, kind of interesting given how cozy the Obamas and the Bushes became down the road. But what's interesting about that is that it kind of establishes a standard, right? Which is if you are in power now, you're probably doing corrupt shit. And, when you pass the torch, if it's understood that this person's not going to come after you, then that person feels they're comfortable, they're safe, they're protected as well. And it seems to me that with all the pardons in the past and things like that we've seen from president to president, and forgiveness, and just not even pursuing any kind of legislation, or not legislation, legal action. um, it's interesting that Trump is different. That for at this point, we don't see that kind of behavior. Now, granted, the January 6th incident kind of is a whole different, monster in itself. But at the same time, this isn't related to that so far as we know. So, what are they after him for? And why are they breaking from the established pattern here?
I mean, did Hillary Clinton did get raided when I mean, I understand everybody's going to be like, but what about her emails? Whenever I say this, but you know what I'm saying, there's definitely a double standard here, and it's pretty apparent to everybody who's paid the slightest bit of attention.
Absolutely. Of course, also Hillary wasn't a sitting president, or wasn't a president, previous president. Wah wah wah.
Ah, yeah. Say that one more time.
Hillary will never be president. Although we can only take so much glee from this, knowing that Biden took her place.
And that Donald Trump was president. I mean, let's be honest, it's not like we love him either.
No, absolutely not.
It's just that the constant line about him, it's like it forces you to like be like, well, no, this isn't even like you're not even
Right.
telling the truth about this.
Right. It's the gaslighting is blatant. When I think of Trump, I think he honestly is a bullshit artist. Like recently, he had referenced Elon Musk as like a fellow bullshit artist. Paraphrasing here. Um, the implication being that he himself is one, and I totally believe that he's one of those fake it till you make it kind of
Oh
guys.
yeah.
Like when he was running for president, I don't think he really had a plan. He just went out there, threw things against the wall, and saw what stuck, and just kind of ran off of that. And I think that terrifies the deep state. It terrifies the establishment, which I think is very much a real thing. And that's probably why they put so much focus on him, why they're kind of breaking from the pattern.
What pattern would that be, though?
Kind of scratching each other's backs. I mean,
Oh,
keep in
okay.
mind, like Dick Cheney, right? Look at Dick Cheney. Dude shot his buddy in the face and his buddy apologized.
Yeah.
It,
Well,
he
so I'm sorry to interrupt, but I
No,
was
you're good.
listening to this Michael Malice podcast. For anybody who doesn't know, Malice does a podcast called "You're Welcome." He had Justin Amash on, which I mean, I don't respect a lot of government employees, but he's one I give a little bit of respect to, largely because he's not a government employee anymore. But he was talking
Yeah,
about how these people go to lunch together. Like, they're buddies, they're friends. You know what I'm saying? They go to each other's weddings. They have dinner and family cookouts together. Like, this isn't like, it's all just WWE wrestling shit.
right. It's all theater. That's 100% accurate. And what's interesting too is that it's not like that was different for Donald Trump. The
No,
Clintons. There's plenty of evidence of the Clintons hanging out with
like you were saying
Trump.
about him and Epstein, there's clearly a connection there. I mean, if he was involved with the Clintons and he was clearly involved with Epstein, I mean, there's some fuckery going on.
Right. Yeah. Well, and it seems like who wasn't at this point? Like the question with that I would love to see exposed. I would love to see that black book, like we touched on this last time. Um, but people in power don't want that out there.
Well, why would they? I mean, it's going to expose them for.
Right, exactly. And I think and that's kind of what I mean by the pattern, up to this point, is that the people coming in when Obama came into office, he came in, I think, essentially being sanctioned by the establishment, by the people who actually run the show on the back end. And the whole concept of Republican Democrats, they're so opposed. That really started to kick off with Obama. And I remember Democrats saying, well, it's because they're racist. Never
I
have they
would, I would,
opposed a
I
person.
would disagree. I mean, I think it started with Bush, uh, but it wasn't as pronounced.
So that's a good point. Let me finish this thought though, and then go to that because
Okay.
that's interesting. So I would hear a lot of Democrats say, never before have the Republicans opposed a sitting president like they did with Obama. It's because they're racist. That's what they would. That's what I would hear, and they often reference the Republicans as being the party of no. Now, no, I mean, Mitch McConnell straight up said that we will, our number one priority is make sure nothing this president does passes. Paraphrased, but that's essentially what his position was back then. Um, Interestingly, when it came to Trump, I saw the exact same behavior on the other end, so to speak. Democrats are like, he can't pass anything; he's the worst. And, it's always cracked me up when people are like, "Well, you're racist against, like, Cheetos, and, orange people."
Hmm.
Um, but it was the same it was the same, approach is my point, right? So, during Obama, the opposition party was just, like, completely not willing to work with them. During Trump, it was kind of the same thing or something similar. But going back to Bush is an interesting one because, um, the, liberals of the time were really against Bush. Now, the modern Democrats, they love Bush. I mean, if anything at this point,
They
they've
love Liz
proven.
Cheney, bro.
I
Liz
know, right?
fucking Cheney.
I know,
You know how much
right?
blood that bitch has on her hands? I'm sorry,
Oh
YouTube,
no,
but
no, yeah. Well, just the fact that we're talking about this will probably get us pulled at some
yeah,
point.
yeah.
Well, once we get enough attention. So yeah, right. Well, and Dick Cheney's coming out. Like, I don't know if you saw him. He did a ad for Liz to support Liz Cheney, where he calls Donald Trump a coward.
I did see that. Hold on, let's pull that up.
Yeah, yeah, definitely pull that. And before we watch it, though, I'm gonna finish my thought on Bush. What I think made Bush different, honestly, even though that was a contested election as well. You're not allowed to talk about the most recent election on YouTube, but you can certainly talk about the 2000 election or the 1800 election. There are different elections in U.S. history that were contested. Um, despite that, Bush was present during a national crisis. And it was that national crisis that led both parties essentially to rally behind him, and at least in the first part of his
Under the
first.
guise of the Patriot Act.
Oh my God, yes. And to me, it's interesting, and I'm actually touching on this with the Substack I've been telling you about. It's like a multi-piece project, and I'm gonna be touching on that. The concept of the crisis and the new normal. That goes back to Yuri Bezmenov and the whole concept of destabilizing a country. But the point I'm getting at is that Bush was kind of unique in a sense from the surface, in that he foresaw a severe crisis and that managed to kind of rally the troops, so to speak, across the political aisle. A lot of us, who, like I myself at the time, I've never been associated with either party. I'm an independent. Um, I was outraged. I felt like none of it made sense, and the reaction was wrong. And I watched how there was really no deviation from that message. We all rallied together. So in that regard, saw a kind of unification behind Bush at first, but then once he got a second term, then it started to be more like we're not doing anything. He's falling back on his dad's laurels in that regard because his father didn't really. I mean, I would argue that the Cold War more ended under Bush Senior, but he didn't really accomplish a whole lot as president. So
It
in the
was just
second,
kind of the petering out of it, you know.
exactly right. So yeah,
You know what the difference is between you and me and Nancy Pelosi, Dick Cheney, etc.
hundreds of millions of dollars,
Well, other
blood
than
on
the
my
fact
hand.
that they are wealthy beyond our comprehension, when
I
they
don't eat babies.
or do other horrid things to
Uh,
them,
allegedly, allegedly.
allegedly, yes. When they saw 9/11, they saw a way for them to gain more power. When we saw 9/11, we saw a bunch of people die.
Right, and us losing freedom.
Yes, yes. That of course we saw that afterwards, but yes, yes, for
Right,
sure.
right. Yeah, no, I get your point though. That's a good point. That's exactly what it's like.
Like
And it's
they're
kind of
sociopaths.
right. And it's kind of this is one of the most disheartening aspects of this when you think about it. The same people that were in power then still are. I mean, Joe Biden's been around, like I think he started in his 30s and he's been a politician since. He's ran for president three
I've
times.
listen. He's so old. I have CNN video of him dropping n bombs like he's in a fucking rap video.
That's amazing. That I definitely have to see.
I'll send it to you.
Yeah, that's definitely not a YouTube thing.
Yeah, I can't show it on here. Sorry, guys. If you want to see it, join the Discord.
Yep.
I'll drop it in there.
All right. I'll be right back. If you want to go ahead and start the video, I've already seen it. So
Oh,
I won't
that's
miss
fine.
anything.
Let's take about a 2 minute break. I gotta take a leak real quick.
Sounds good.
All right, we'll be right back, guys.
Yep.
All right. Well, welcome back, everybody. Unless you never left, and thanks. But we don't have any viewers, so wasn't none of
Uh,
y'all. It was just us. That's
we're
all
just
right. I just now shared the link to Facebook, so I'm a bad
we're screaming
promoter.
into the void. Yeah, well, that definitely that might have a hand in it.
Might help a little bit, huh? Anyway, what were we talking about? Bush, I know, but
Yeah, well, we pretty much like I was just talking about the difference between how the different presidencies were reacted to by the opposing party, and how Obama was so stark, and then Trump was so stark, and the narrative around Obama that kind of fell short when you saw the same kind of rage against Trump, right? It's like the argument I heard is that you never saw this kind of antipathy, towards a president is Obama. It must be because he's black, but then Trump becomes president, and then you see the exact same, if not worse, towards Trump
it's
from
because
his
he's
opposition.
yellow.
Right, right. And then regarding Bush, the idea was that he had less of that antipathy, possibly because of the unification around a crisis, the result of the terrorist attacks.
He did, but man, they hated him. I remember watching the Daily Show, the Colbert Report,
Hmm.
all of the normal stuff at the time, and they really they hated him, and with good reason. I mean,
Right, right. Yeah, well, there definitely was a lot of that, but that was more in the second term that you really started to see it from the politicians. Like that, then that's where the difference is. Yeah, the pundits, the entertainment sector certainly came after him, but and of course, the individual people on the ground, like as stated myself, came after him. But the actual politicians, Nancy Pelosi and them, backed him in a lot of ways at first. And so yeah,
only
that's
because he was politically expedient for them to push through shit like the Patriot Act.
absolutely. And then of course, people would say, well, Bush was foot in the door for tyranny, essentially through things like the Patriot Act. And keep in mind that what was exposed by Snowden and Julian Assange, you know, results of that, what was happening through that period and on. But then you have Obama with the NDAA 2012. I remember when that occurred, there was no outrage, no cry out against it from my, Democrat and left
Hold
leaning
on,
friends.
what's the NDAA?
National Defense Authorization Act, essentially every year has one. It's one of the most easiest bills to pass. Pretty much everybody agrees on it, unless it's an election year.
You
Uh,
mean Bernie Sanders does? He gives millions of dollars to the military-industrial complex.
I'm sure. Everybody, we all do, whether we like it or not.
Yeah,
Um,
I
so
know he
the,
does.
the
I was being facetious.
Yeah, yeah. So the interesting thing about the NDAA in the year 2012 is that that was the first year that they added certain clauses where they started to read, as you might remember during the Bush tenure, one of the biggest problems, they kept redefining the word terrorism, right? It started as as one definition, and they kept making it broader and broader and broader, because anything that was done in the name of terrorism, they had more freedom to react to. And part of this justified the concept of the Patriot Act, which, of course, was them being able to spy on us and do all kinds of other things, which is still unconstitutional. And yet nobody wants to challenge it, which tells you everything about both parties. Um, the NDAA 2012 had a particular part of it that if a person was a terrorist actor, if memory serves, domestic and foreign, then you could actually be indefinitely detained without trial while they're determining what's going on there. And they meant it, indefinitely detained without trial, because it's considered essentially a military thing. Um, and so, what this grants the government is the ability to essentially deem you a terrorist and then kind of lock you up in Guantanamo or wherever the hell they want, without due process, which again, unconstitutional. Now, this is really a concern because when it happened, I tried to raise awareness with it. I said, well, okay, this is a problem because, you know, obviously, but people were like, well, it's Obama. He would never use this in a bad way. I'm like, well, that's naive as hell. But
Oh, I
regardless,
listen. I thought that when I first voted for him.
regardless, well, this was after that. This is after his.
I know.
He was
I'm
part of
just
the.
saying. I mean,
No, no,
we
I'm
were all kind of
well, yeah, because he was the perfect presidential candidate, and I could speak for hours on that. Um, I voted for him the first time. I didn't the second time.
same.
But regardless, the point is, a lot of people would say, "Well, it's Obama. You never do this," and I'd say, "What if we got the next president and it was the worst person you could imagine, and then they have this power, and they would always come back. You're just deflecting from the bigger issue, like Roe v. Wade and all this stuff, which cracks me up because that was all they had plenty of time. Obama had a super majority. He could have codified Roe v. Wade anytime he wanted. The Democrats didn't want to do that so that they can continue to keep this kind of mentality in place. These people that were
How are they gonna
responding.
raise funds though, man? If they can't point to abortion.
Right, exactly. So that argument is what I received. I essentially got attacked. Um, they would say I was racist, I was whatever, and they would attack me. This is back in 2011, 2012, okay? Because it was around 2012. Um, because the NDAA for that year is actually written in advance. But people didn't want to listen to me. So whatever, it is what it is. Now, of course, Trump became president. And it's like, ooh, about that, I if I were still in contact with those same people, I would be more than happy to be like, how do you feel about Trump being able to indefinitely detain you? But it is what it is.
Oh, you know what they'd say? They deflect and be like, oh well, nobody else would use that. Just Trump. Just
Right,
Trump is the
exactly.
only person who would do that.
Speaking of which, so as that progresses just this year, as you know, the uh, Department of Homeland Security redefined its its definitions of what is domestic and international terrorism. And part of that is the use of misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. And these terms are kind of messy, to say the least, but it's essentially speech. And just recently, as you might have noticed, they also, I think it was the FBI, if I remember correctly, uh, through it was Ted Cruz that actually called this out. Ted Cruz, by the way, for anybody who's listening, I'm not a fan at all. But he rightfully called it out that they were a bunch of different flags that were being used as potential signifiers of terrorism. So what we have is essentially the metaphor of the boiled frog. And for those that don't know, the idea is that if you put a frog in water and you slowly increase the temperature, it will inevitably boil alive, and it won't notice because it adapts to the increase in temperature. And we've been doing this consistently across different presidencies and whatnot. It's worth noting that those who might think that Trump was some kind of maverick, he wasn't. He completely supported all these policies. In fact, doubled down in some of them. So their enmity with him is a little curious, but obviously because he strikes me as being very heterodox and maybe uncontrollable, but he still nevertheless is feeding and supporting this status quo. And so, yeah, that's what that's something to consider. I'm like rambling here.
Yeah, all right. Let's watch his Dick Cheney ad.
Yeah, let's do it.
Congresswoman Liz Cheney of Wyoming. He backed her challenger. That primary, just 11 days away now, is in its final stretch. She's calling on her old man for some help. Dick Cheney, the former vice president, who in a new ad for his daughter delivers this message.
In our nation's 246-year history, there has never been an individual who is a greater threat to our republic than Donald Trump. He tried to steal the last election using lies and violence to keep himself in power after the voters had rejected him. He is a coward.
Congresswoman
Cheney
Cheney
looks
has
like
been
he
one of the
just,
fiercest critics.
Either just got off the toilet or really has to get on one.
He's always looked like that. I don't think I've ever seen a picture of Dick Cheney that doesn't look like he's about to take a big dump. But man, look, let's watch that one more time. I'm sorry. I gotta watch that one more time.
That primary, just 11 days away now, is in its final stretch. She's calling on her old man for some help. Dick Cheney, the former vice president, who in a new ad for his daughter delivers this message.
In our nation's 246-year history, there has never been an individual who is a greater threat to our republic than Donald Trump. He tried to steal the last election using lies and violence to keep himself in power after the voters had rejected him. He is a coward.
It's interesting that Dick Cheney is using he tried to steal the election when that is literally what him and George Bush were accused of with Al Gore.
Yeah, the irony definitely was not lost on me.
It's also frustrating.
It really is. Like, you know, if we were in a situation where people would be honest, I don't know, like life would be 1,000 times better, but let's be honest, that wouldn't benefit.
You don't even have to be honest.
the
I'm not even
establishment.
asking for honesty. You don't have to tell me anything. Just be consistent in your views. That's all I'm asking.
Yeah, I can respect that. Absolutely. Yeah, well, and a lot of this isn't really the core ideological framework, I think, is more about, like you said, expediency. It's about power. It's not even like at a certain, like I was thinking about this recently. At a certain point, when you get enough money, you get enough power, it no longer becomes a job to make money. It is now a hobby to make money. When you look at Elon Musk, I heard this is hearsay, so take it with a grain of salt. But I heard that he admitted that the whole bullshit tunnels stuff that he was talking about, in Vegas and whatever, was just a way to kind of circumvent funding for highways in a way that wouldn't benefit him as a businessman. And you look at Twitter, there's a theory going around that the whole point of buying Twitter was because he recognized that it was an overinflated, overvalued stock at the time. And he would optimize his returns, sell while it was overflated without raising concerns. Why is he, selling so much stock? Twitter was a nice excuse.
He's not doing anything Nancy Pelosi ain't doing. I mean,
Well, right. Well, and I'm not criticizing him per se. I'm just saying
I
that.
know. I'm just saying. I love digging on Nancy Pelosi. So.
Oh yeah,
bitch.
I despise Nancy Pelosi. I can't stand her. If you want to see corruption, man, I mean, there's like the video I shared with you, upper echelon gamers.
We should watch
like
that
coverage.
actually.
He does fantastic independent journalistic work. A lot of people don't give him credit. I think he deserves it as somebody who's been involved in journalist community, the journalist sphere. Because he started, best of my knowledge, a YouTuber. He's not really seen as like someone like a Matt Taibbi, for example, and yet he does excellent investigative work.
Welcome to the upper
It's the
echelon
never
YouTube.
guess one. I highly
Highest
recommend
positions
it. But yeah, before we get started, I do want to say this. The interesting thing about it is that Nancy Pelosi, unlike most political figures, has ran, I believe, for like 20 or maybe 30 years unopposed by a Democrat.
In California?
The Democrats do not oppose her. She has been given her seat, like hand given to her. And remember, she's in San Francisco. So it's kind of a given. She's gonna win regardless. And if any Democrat ran against her, they would be disowned by the Democrat Party, DNC.
I don't know how she keeps getting elected. Anybody in San Francisco, if they espoused their political views to me, and then they said they voted for Nancy Pelosi, I would look like them, look at them like they were the dumbest son of a bitch on the planet.
Yeah, I would too, especially after all this time. Like, come on. Like, Pelosi was the one who tanked the public option of Obama's insurance legislation, um, which incidentally was hilarious because Obama ran against Hillary Clinton, with Clinton having one plan and Obama's essentially being the same, but with the public option that offset everything. So there wouldn't be a gift to the insurance companies. Oh shit, I gotta say this too while I'm on this. But Clinton's plan, of course, was Romney's plan, Romney Care, which he did in his state, right?
Right.
When Obama won, because clearly people didn't want Hillary Clinton, when Obama won, we still managed to get Hillary's plan regardless, thanks to the Democrats. Now, here's the interesting thing: 8 of the 10 highest um, uh, paid politicians in Congress by the healthcare lobby, I'm talking like big pharma essentially, are Democrats. And the second highest paid Democrat by big pharma is Chuck Schumer. A lot of people don't want to talk about that.
Well, listen, I used to work for an insurance company, and I'll just go ahead and tell you who it is. It's Blue Cross Blue Shield of Maryland. Let me tell you, their paws are in it deep. And
Well,
I can't elaborate. I'm sorry.
yeah, I understand. No,
But
it makes sense.
it's deep.
Right. Well, and you don't even
And
need to
and
elaborate.
not just deep like connections to other people. I'm talking deep. They're not just deep like, oh, let's fund Nancy Pelosi or XYZ or whoever. It's they're all in on it. The whole ideology, man.
Right,
Which is,
exactly.
most corporations today, but
Sure. But it also definitely it's blatant. You can see it. You don't even need to know how deep it goes to see that it's a direct influence. And it definitely highlights the concerns that we should have with agencies like the FDA and the CDC, as how they reacted with not just COVID but other things.
let's
You
not
know,
say COVID. Let's call it something else. so,
uh,
so we don't get the warning. Can we say coup for
that's a fair point. I actually didn't even think about that.
I
Coof is
didn't
good.
either until you said it, but
Yeah. We got to watch what we say because there's definitely not
we've already been demonetized on Facebook.
there's not a collusion between these agencies and government and social media. But regardless, the point is, it's interesting to see that kind of connection. Speaking of which, it's worth pointing out just random factoid that the viewers may not know, but it is absolutely true. The highest paid federal employee in the United States is Anthony Fauci.
Fauci.
He gets paid more than his boss. He gets paid more than the president of the United States.
More than Biden? No way.
And oh, yeah, he also has stock interests in certain
No, not a
certain
government
foreign.
official. They would never use their position of authority to do that.
Yeah, to gain benefit from stock and whatnot. Or interestingly enough, the NIH actually they get royalties for certain uh, scientific. Well, because the NIH essentially funds a lot of actual science that goes on. When they talk about studies and stuff, the NIH kind of decides what's going to be studied and what isn't, and they have influences across the globe. It's not just in the U.S. But they also receive royalties for the different things that they, research, and if it leads to a medication that the FDA approves, they get a little cut on the back end.
Like
Uh,
NASA.
yeah. But anyway, speaking of a government working exactly as it should, let's go ahead and watch this video.
Why would you guess if you already knew the answer? For most of us, for all of us really, we wouldn't. That question itself is rhetorical. It has an answer, an obvious answer, and this answer is obvious because the simple reality is that if you already know, you can't make a guess. For the stock market, that level of knowledge is exceptionally rare. Finding a legitimate and legal sure thing is like the holy grail of finance, but in a world where cutting corners and financial success is considered to be some sort of twisted badge of honor, some people will inevitably decide to make a stock trade when they already know the answer.
I just want to say something real quick here. I don't blame them, to be honest. I mean, like he said, you already know the answer. Regardless of what you do, it could be considered insider trading.
Right, exactly.
So I think I just want to, really the only answer to stop this is term limits. Prevent them
That
from obtaining the information.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. We have to be really cautious about the place that um the to me one of the biggest concerns about term limits, because that's a great idea, but what happens when they leave? A lot of these people, they scratch the back of the big corporation and then they move on to it. For example, a lot of people don't know this. The previous, well, I don't know about, yeah, I assume Linsky's still there, but the previous head of the FDA, Scott Gottlieb, went on to become a chair member of Pfizer and makes a fortune off of the vaccines that the FDA, was really quick to pass.
Yeah.
So, this isn't the first time this kind of thing's happened. In fact, it's kind of par for the course at this point. You have somebody go into an agency like the FTC or the FDA or even the CD, and they act in such a way that benefits a corporation and gives them a foot in the door. So they leave that position and they get this higher paid position in the private sector. So you have some, with term limits, that doesn't necessarily fix this problem where it's essentially a career path.
But I'm not sure that
Highest
that problem.
positions.
Sorry, I'm not sure that that problem can even be fixed.
Not unless you were to create a kind of limitation like you're not allowed to work in this industry. If you're going to regulate this industry, you cannot work in this industry
Or trade.
or trade. And they would never agree to that.
Ever.
In fact, they would argue that I have to be proficient in this industry in order to regulate it. I already know the lines, but unless you manage
which
to
does make
concentrate-
sense. I understand that. I would like them to be more proficient in things other than just the stock trading, though.
Right. Well, no, I completely agree. Yeah, but so that kind of highlights the problem. Maybe if there's more, um, I don't know, transparency on some level, that might help. But like, what do you do? This is such a complicated issue because it's interwoven with the very fabric of the nature of the issue, the beast itself. In order to regulate something, you have to know it. In order to know it, you have to be entangled with that industry. So then do you not go on to be able to work for the industry that you know so well?
Yeah. I mean, so yeah. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that
Yeah,
question.
it's definitely out of our pay grade, but
Thank God.
but yeah, it's complicated.
All right, let's get back to the video.
Highest position.
Oh, if I can figure out how to do that. Sorry.
It's all good, man.
Highest positions in the entire American government, while her husband is the owner of a sizable venture capital investment firm. Combined, Nancy and Paul Pelosi represent almost 120 years of political and financial power in this nation. But today I want to focus on where the money comes from, how it is gained, and ask the question, is it even legal? Before getting started, I need to clarify something. I am treating these two individuals as a joint financial entity. Paul and Nancy Pelosi have been married for many decades. This means that they are linked directly, and while they have publicly maintained that no insider information has ever changed hands between them, their assets.
Why would you even claim that? Anybody who hears you say that is going to know that it's a fucking lie. There's nothing I don't tell my wife. I'm looking at her
Right?
as she's over here eating a Pop-Tart.
Don't eyeball me, motherfucker.
But nobody's gonna believe you don't get home to your husband and be like, oh man, I just don't know what I'm gonna do about this Elon Musk. He's building this electric vehicle and wants to build this, I don't know, tunnel through Las Vegas. That was probably dumb, but yeah, you get the point.
Assets are jointly owned. While one works at the epicenter of American government, the other makes millions in a market that very often reacts based on government decisions. For today, I will make no definitive claims about whether or not information is being shared between them, but I'd like to showcase a series of events in chronological order. Let's begin. It all starts with an American multinational technology company called NVIDIA. NVIDIA is best known for its design and manufacture of graphics processing units, GPUs, but beyond that, they have a hand in a variety of other industries and fields. NVIDIA is a large company, a successful company, and a company with increased business as the adoption of video games and crypto mining have exploded in recent years. But NVIDIA also represents a very unique opportunity, if someone were able to understand insider information. In June of 2022, Paul and Nancy Pelosi, as per governmental requirements, disclosed a purchase of 20,000 NVIDIA shares. In today's market conditions, which were similar at the time, that would be roughly $3.7 million. In a vacuum, this would just be a wealthy couple investing millions of dollars in a company that they believe to be profitable, but we do not live in a vacuum. This trade, June 17th to be precise, occurred at an interesting time. While Paul Pelosi was purchasing millions of dollars of NVIDIA stock, Nancy Pelosi was advocating for and pushing through a 1,000-page piece of legislation called the CHIPS Act that would provide over $50 billion in tax credits and subsidies for American-based technology companies such as NVIDIA. The conflict of interest here is very obvious. A husband is buying millions of dollars worth of stock market options while his wife is pushing legislation that will give them billions in credits and subsidies. What could go?
How do you have the balls to say, I don't talk to my husband about what's going on when this happens and it's so blatantly obvious?
Oh, it only gets worse, man.
I haven't watched the whole video, so.
Right. Well, you'll see it definitely gets worse. And on top of that, if you look at, she has been called out on this before, and there's footage of that, and her response is just, complete. Like, I'm not even gonna talk about it. I'm not. No, this is absolutely false, and I'm done with talks.
Oh,
Like,
I know.
questions are-
I'm very similar to the Chappelle skit where he's like, he's president, and then they start asking him questions. He's like, "Run!"
Right. Exactly. Just like that.
Go wrong? The answer is everything. Not only did this dawning reality spark widespread calls for harsher regulations of congressional trading, it also pushed Nancy Pelosi into a mainstream public opinion storm as her integrity was called into question and her finances were scrutinized. The result? Paul and Nancy Pelosi sold their NVIDIA stock at a significant loss mere days before the bill was actually pushed through to the president's desk. More interestingly, this was the first time in history that the Pelosi's had disclosed a stock trade on the same day that it was executed. Going back, trades for Apple, Amazon, Visa, Alphabet, and more were all being disclosed weeks or even multiple months after they had been made. The sale of NVIDIA, with a special note clarifying that this was one of the exceptionally rare instances where they had actually lost money, was declared on the same day it occurred. Now, one might logically think that this is the end of the story. A wife pushes legislation that will tremendously benefit a specific company, a husband spends millions of dollars on that same company as she does it, and when called out, they run for cover. But no, it's not over. Let's look at some of the Pelosi's other holdings, because the picture is only just beginning to form. After public scrutiny grew, media and individual investigators began to report on all of the Pelosi's stock trades, and within those reports are some interesting findings. Here, as reported by Insider, we can see that Paul Pelosi, over the span of about a year, has acquired millions of dollars worth of AllianceBernstein. AllianceBernstein is a global investment firm, and among their portfolio of significant holdings, we can see $153 million of TSM. Now, TSM, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing, is an important company to remember because they are the global leader of semiconductor chip fabrication.
I know where this is going now.
So how does it connect? Well, if we remember that the Pelosi's sold millions of dollars of NVIDIA, at a loss I might add, possibly in response to public criticism, it would make sense that they maintained another angle of profiting from the CHIPS Act. But there's something else to consider here that has far more weight in my opinion. In July and August of 2022, there was a leak from the White House. Nancy Pelosi, it turned out, was going to visit Taiwan.
Yep.
This put her at odds with the Biden administration because the trip was very controversial. China has strong opinions on sovereignty and territory possession, so Nancy Pelosi visiting Taiwan as a high-ranking government official was sure to create tension. Just a few days after the sale of their NVIDIA stock, Nancy Pelosi did indeed go on the trip, and on August 2nd, she published an op-ed in the Washington Post. This op-ed was a lengthy explanation of why she was leading the delegation, making no mention of semiconductor chips, domestic manufacturing, or TSM, and it contained a strong implication that the purpose of this trip was to infuriate China. She simultaneously says that the trip in no way contradicts the One China policy, but then makes specific mention of Tiananmen Square, a subject that can only ever infuriate the Chinese government and is heavily censored in that region. An interesting example is Call of Duty Cold War, actually, from video games, where the trailer was scrubbed from the internet within hours because it contained just a few seconds and frames of footage from that massacre.
Also, if you ever run across cheaters while playing online, remember, Tiananmen Square. Type it in the chat repeatedly. Because they're probably Chinese and they'll lose connection real quick.
Well, not only that, if they're streaming their own stuff, you know that like YouTube.
Yeah, they're gonna get in some serious trouble about that.
Yeah, YouTube does not like it.
I wonder how many Chinese I've sent to camps.
Oh man.
Highest positions in the entire American.
Probably too many, right? I don't want to think about it now.
Hey man, it's Chinese like free labor.
Highest positions in credits and subsidies. What could go wrong? The answer is everything. Not to the president's desk. More interestingly, this was the first time in history that the Pelosi's had disclosed a stock trade on the same day that it was executed. Going back, trades for Apple, Amazon, Visa, Alphabet, and more were all being disclosed weeks or even multiple months after they had been made. The sale of NVIDIA, with a special note clarifying that this was one of the exceptionally rare instances where they had actually lost money, was declared on the same day it occurred. Now, one might logically think that this is the end of the story. AllianceBernstein is a global investment firm, and among their portfolio of significant holdings, we can see $153 million of Nancy Pelosi, it turned out, was going to visit Taiwan. This put her at odds with the Biden administration because the trip was very controversial. China has strong opinions on sovereignty and territory possession, so Nancy Pelosi visiting Taiwan as a high-ranking government official was sure to create tension. Just a few days after the sale of their NVIDIA stock, Nancy Pelosi did indeed go on the trip, and on August 2nd, she published an op-ed in the Washington Post. This op-ed was a lengthy explanation of why she was leading the delegation, making no mention of semiconductor chips, domestic manufacturing, or TSM, and it contained a strong implication that the purpose of this trip was to infuriate China. She simultaneously says that the trip in no way contradicts the One China policy, but then makes specific mention of Tiananmen Square, a subject that can only ever infuriate the Chinese government and is heavily censored in that region. An interesting example is Call of Duty Cold War, actually, from video games, where the trailer was scrubbed from the internet within hours because it contained just a few seconds and frames of footage from that massacre. The One China policy.
Also, I want to say, the whole thing was scrubbed from the internet because of China. Fuck China.
Yeah, no doubt. One thing to throw out there too, a lot of people, like unfortunately, upper echelon here missed too, is that Nancy Pelosi brought her son along on the trip, and that's a conversation worth having after we're done with this.
Is he a pro StarCraft player?
No,
Oh,
no,
how'd
but
he go then?
he's in. Well, that's the question. We'll discuss that when we're done here, though.
Okay.
If I have time.
Dictates that Taiwan is a breakaway province that needs to be reunited with the mainland. So if her visit does not contradict the One China policy, why is the rest of her op-ed aimed at denouncing CCP posturing and aggression by Beijing, which obviously aligns with their existing goals. The reason in my mind is quite simple. Meekly deny what you are doing as a formality, and then antagonize the Chinese government as much as possible. Regardless, Pelosi went ahead with her visit to Taiwan, and while there, she specifically met for a lengthy period of time with executives from TSM. Nancy Pelosi and her husband hold millions of dollars in a firm that holds over $150 million in TSM, while she antagonizes the CCP, visits the company itself, and then proceeds to create international tension. Very interesting. Now, one theory I have heard repeatedly, a prominent theory on social media, but an incorrect one, is that the Pelosi's intended to purchase Nvidia, inflame tensions with China over Taiwan, and reap the benefits of market corrections if actions were to be taken against Taiwan by China, thereby impacting TSM. That is highly unlikely, and I'll tell you precisely why. Nvidia does not make their own silicon chips. In fact, TSMC is now the sole supplier of Nvidia for all of their GPUs, and also a wide range of other products that they sell, a significant number in fact. TSMC in Taiwan being damaged by Chinese action would destroy the share price of Nvidia as well. So what's really going on? Let me ask a question. Is it possible, having defied the Biden administration on purpose to craft this visit, and having previously held millions of dollars worth of Nvidia stock, that the Pelosi's were aware that inflamed tensions could spell disaster for their prior investment? Is it possible that a husband would buy massive amounts of stock as his wife promotes government legislation to benefit that stock, and then sell it at a loss right before his wife then goes to a country, infuriating a world superpower, which could have disastrous consequences for that same stock and its entire surrounding industry? Is it possible?
Let's be honest. If I could infuriate a world superpower, I 100% would. So nice flex, Pelosi. Nice flex.
Yeah.
That all this,
Yeah.
the whipsaw back and forth
No
of buying and
doubt.
selling, would occur within such a short time frame? Is it possible that it's just coincidence? Or is it likely that somebody knows the answers before they heard the question? It turns out, 2020 hindsight as a factor, market reactions are beginning to give us a better picture already. Taiwan is in the spotlight, and it's not a good thing. The actions of Nancy Pelosi, according to Barron's, have created significant risk for TSM, all of its clients, and the global chip economy if Beijing retaliates. Investors might be at risk, but the Pelosi's have now offloaded their millions of dollars of Nvidia stock, which greatly insulates them from whatever might happen next. They are not fully immune, by the way, but they are certainly more insulated than they were just a few months ago. And all of these moves, the action and the reaction, are a result of Nancy Pelosi's own governmental decisions. Buy a stock? Turns out Nancy is pushing something beneficial for it at the top levels of government. Sell that stock? Turns out Nancy was about to do something very risky that could hurt it on a global stage. And this is far from the only example. In March of 2021, Nancy Pelosi disclosed that between $2 and $10 million worth of Microsoft stock had been purchased. On its own, that's not uncommon. High-profile tech stocks are traded by a wide range of investors every single day, but this time was different. Within less than 2 weeks, Microsoft had been awarded a $22 billion government contract with the military to provide augmented reality headsets. Also in 2021, May 21st and June 18th to be exact, Nancy Pelosi disclosed high six-figure and multi-million-dollar purchases in Apple, Amazon, and Alphabet, the owners of Google. Again, significant stocks in the market. Usually nothing to see here. What's wrong with that? But it turns out at the very same time, not one, not two, not three, four, or five, but 6 bipartisan antitrust bills were coming down the government pipeline, 4 of which were aimed squarely at Apple, Google, and Amazon. Now, this would obviously require the question, why would the Pelosi's buy millions of dollars of tech stock that was possibly going to be broken up or otherwise significantly damaged by regulation? It's a good question, but what if you had the answer before the question was even being asked? It turns out that Nancy Pelosi, a representative from California, no less, where big tech composes a significant share of the state's economy and tax revenue, has oscillated back and forth numerous times over the years between support, whether legitimate or feigned, of big tech regulation, and outright opposition to various reform efforts. According to lobbyist sources, Nancy Pelosi has even killed big tech legislation in the past. Quote, Pelosi won't let it get to the floor. Still, why buy big tech companies when there are 6 bills that could break those same companies up completely being lobbied for in various congressional committees? Well, what if you already had the answer to an unasked question, and you knew that those bills were not going anywhere? When the market actually became aware of this legislation, just a couple of weeks or even days after the stock purchases were made, the share prices rose. Why? Because the legislation didn't have teeth, and the Pelosi's, so it seems, had made a remarkable bet that once again paid off in the face of all odds, while Nancy Pelosi worked in the very same branch of government where these bills were being crafted, scrutinized, and lobbied for, before the public had any idea what the chances actually were. A series of remarkably lucky bets, or maybe just amazing expertise and totally legitimate trading, I'm not sure. But what I am sure of is that Nancy and Paul Pelosi have outperformed the S&P 500 by a massive margin. This political and financial power couple have actually performed so well with so many seemingly clairvoyant trades that an entire fund has emerged just to mimic their trading behavior. Wall Street Bets users and outside technology firms have partnered up to now offer a dedicated mirror of Nancy Pelosi's stock trading portfolio because she and her husband have seen incredible success with the same tools and information as everyone else, even though she works in the epicenter of government, because she never communicates anything to him, and all of the stocks that they trade right before those stocks are monumentally impacted by government policies or contracts are just coincidence. In 2021, Pelosi's portfolio was tracked at a net 50% positive return. The regular market, such as the S&P 500, barely 20%. The Pelosi's are routinely able to thread the needle with a series of trades that will be almost immediately catalyzed by some sort of government action. I can't say with definitive proof or certainty that the Pelosi's are doing something illegal, and I want to once again frame this as a question. But what number of coincidences does it take? 1, 2, 3, 5, how many? Before you start to make your own determination. Everyone has a different answer, but more and more every day, people in America are reaching that threshold because members of our government on a fixed salary of, say, $200,000 are going in with a couple $100,000 in assets and coming out with tens of millions or more. Where's that money coming from? What precisely did they do to earn $100 million from stock trades and speaking engagements? The answer? They already know, but all of us get to sit here and wonder because of course they would never share anything with their spouse, and of course they would never buy millions of dollars of Zoom stock and teleconferencing options right after an early coronavirus briefing. That did happen, by the way, it just wasn't Pelosi, but some congressmen were buying Zoom and even selling cruise lines. Also, one of the congressional members doing that was married to the chairman of the New York Stock Exchange, because the spider web is incredible. But they were doing this right after they had a security briefing on how bad COVID might actually get. Oh, and the kicker, some of them were also frantically buying up stock in Moderna, one of the companies responsible for vaccine production, before the government had even classified COVID as a pandemic. So that's fun. Anyway, Nancy Pelosi and her husband Paul have got to be some of the best stock traders in the world, if they're honest, or the most obvious example of unpunished insider trading that I have ever seen if they aren't. However, ultimately, that's not my call to make. That's it. If you want to support, please check out the links down below, primarily Locals and Patreon, also Odyssey, a YouTube platform alternative, merchandise, social media, another YouTuber to check out, and more, but I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching.
Alright. Anyway, upper echelon gamer, I can make a guess. Nancy Pelosi is honest. She would never do that.
Never.
I mean, I don't have anything to add after that. He pretty much covered it all.
Yeah, well, I think so too. So with that in mind, in the video topics thread that we got going on here, shit, where's that? Ah, there it is. Okay, so I shared a video from the Hill.
I got it here.
Yeah, throw that on. It's entertaining. So for those who may not know, the Hill is it's a kind of centrist outlet
They lean a
publication.
little bit left for me, but yeah, I like them.
The show is typically these days done by a libertarian and a like a socialist, like hard left
Yeah.
and a libertarian. Um, and they both do well, very well, I think, and they bring in a lot of good
They
commentary across the spectrum.
believe they were on a podcast I listened to from Andrew Heaton called The Political Orphanage that I first was introduced to him from.
Interesting. I actually missed that one. But that's good to know. I actually like this particular YouTube channel. It's an interesting blend of opinion and just basic facts. And they bring in people literally across the spectrum. You know, they've been pretty bold about what kind of perspectives they're willing to bring in. So
And
yeah,
they were even like, it was the heel that was not deplatformed, but got a strike on YouTube for.
yeah. Well, kind of deplatformed. They were kicked off YouTube for a week. So for those who don't know, earlier this year, essentially, they were covering a speech by Trump, and in this speech, Trump raised the erroneous claim that the election was stolen. That obviously is false.
Yes, false. YouTube.
Very false.
That was false.
It's not true. It did not happen.
Not
In
at
any
all.
event,
No one
they,
believes it. Definitely not
they
us.
they weren't even talking about that. He just happened to cover it during the speech.
It was like a video they played or something, right?
Right. And even in the conversation about it, they were, calling him a madman and things like that. The Democrat that they had on there um, was, calling him like kind of a madman and things like that. So, but the very fact that they didn't dispute the claim from the clip was enough for YouTube to kick them off for a week.
Also,
Uh,
let me say one more time, YouTube, we absolutely dispute that claim.
Absolutely.
Okay, go
It
ahead.
was
Sorry.
a completely legitimate election.
No fuckery at all.
No fuckery at all. Anyway, so with that being said, yeah, so the Hill got hit with that weird compelled speech uh policy that YouTube has apparently.
Yeah.
Regardless, yeah, no, I actually like the Hill as far as a kind of mainstream media. They're probably going to be the fairest that you're going to get, and you're going to see some heterodox positions on it that you're not going to see anywhere from any of the other mainstream medias. So I'm kind of I'm promoting them in that regard. But with this particular one, they're talking about Nancy Pelosi bringing her son on board on that trip, and there's some interesting stuff to be addressed there. We don't necessarily have to watch the whole conversation, but they do cover it.
Okay,
So,
well, we can get to the point where you want to stop and just let me know.
sounds good.
Fox News host Jesse Waters reported last night that Nancy Pelosi's controversial visit to Taiwan included one previously unreported guest. Let's watch.
So what does Paulie Jr. do all day? Well, last week, Nancy snuck little Paulie on her plane to Asia. His name wasn't listed as part of the official delegation. They didn't want you to know Paul went to Asia with his mom. But if you look closely at the photos, there he is. Paulie P. Jr., about as unqualified as Hunter, with all the big dogs there in Asia. And if you thought Hunter Biden's business deals were shady, just wait. Paulie Jr. is on the payroll of 2 lithium mining companies. And Asia just happens to be a lithium gold mine. And Taiwan just happens to be a world leader in lithium battery production. He's also heavily invested in Singapore's energy sector. Wasn't that another stop on Nancy's trip? Oh, it was.
So obviously the implication being that, and we've been trying to come up with a reason for this visit, because it seemed counter to the Biden administration's foreign policy desires. They didn't really want her to do it. She did it anyway. We don't know why. We're trying to come up with a reason. So one reason could be that, it's good business, good money for her family, for her son, in his business interests. Doesn't sound totally implausible, to be frank.
It could be. Lots of things could be. Nepotism is bad. Everyone should agree on that. It's weird for this to be a political conversation when we just had Donald Trump in the White House making his son-in-law ahead of Middle East affairs. So it's difficult for me because it's.
But that doesn't make this correct.
No, that's what I'm saying. It's very easy for me to sit here and say everybody's bad. But the interest
Trump's,
in this
Clintons,
story,
Pelosi's, Biden's, all bad.
100%. Obama seems to be the only one who didn't do this, and perhaps only because his
kids
were
aren't old enough
underage.
yet.
Right.
We'll see what the Malia empire. Well, they're going to be like fashion influencers or something, probably.
I don't know. I think the little one has a good little head on her shoulders. I don't know. Right. Harvard might not have a good effect on the older one. But look,
Harvard might not have a good effect. I already like them.
The reality is that this is what rich people do. This should not be a partisan conversation. This is what rich people have been doing since time immemorial. And I just wish folks were a little even-handed about calling this stuff out.
Well, I do too, but they never are. But I don't know that it's just a partisan conversation. Because Jesse Waters is the one pointing it out?
Yes. Little Polly, the Fresh Prince graphic.
Wow.
I get it. It's TV. It's intended to be entertaining. But the point here is that Nancy Pelosi is one of the least popular politicians in America. She's not especially popular among Democrats, but she's certainly very unpopular among Republicans. Republicans regularly put her in their attack ads to try to convince people to vote for the conservative candidate in various races. As much as progressives are maligned for hurting the Democratic Party, Nancy Pelosi's disfavor among Republicans in these kinds of races is much more pronounced. And I get why you want to go after her and knock your socks off. If it turns out that there is some, nepotism or bad behavior here, that he should have been disclosed, that he was riding on a government-paid flight for his own personal, whatever they can dig up, I don't give a fig.
You're here for it.
Doesn't matter to me. I just wish that the same people who did this were even-handedly also criticizing what Donald Trump and every other rich person since time immemorial has done.
All right, sure.
Well, the House Speaker is facing criticism for this apparent verbal gaffe she made while speaking to NBC News yesterday about her visit to Taiwan. Let's check it out.
We still support the one China policy. We go there to acknowledge the status quo is what our policy is. There was nothing disruptive about that. It was only about saying China is one of the freest societies in the world. Don't let
Somebody get this corpse off the TV.
Take it from me. That's from Freedom House.
Let's talk a little bit.
Democracy, courageous people. And it's just, I don't know why it is, except there's some commercial interests who would like to diminish the relationship.
So she clearly meant Taiwan. That was just I guess that's a gaffe, but it's not really. It's just it's a slip of the tongue. Like she meant it. She said the wrong word.
It happens.
Those of us on TV, we do that all the time. I'm sure I do it plenty of times a day. So I don't really think it's And I saw that clipped and made fun of by maybe the GOP and other conservative people on social media, and that did seem unfair. She clearly meant Taiwan.
She, a bunch of Democrats, and a bunch of Republicans all conspired to make sure that you have to pay enormous prices for your insulin, right? That is all happening. A million other things are happening right now in the ether. They're passing something called an Inflation Reduction Act that has nothing to do with inflation and gives out millions in tax cuts to the fossil fuel industry while you're still paying zillions at the pump. All of this is happening, but so much of the discourse is caught up with, oh my gosh, Nancy Pelosi mixed up her words. Not Nancy Pelosi is corrupt. Not Nancy Pelosi hasn't had a debate with a primary challenger in 30 years.
Or not even a substantive criticism or investigation or exploration of her visit there and the underlying foreign policy realities of it, but just that she said the wrong word.
Correct.
Dumb.
And I know there's an appetite for it, and I'm not saying that liberals don't do this kind of thing. I was watching MSNBC to get.
Better not say that liberals don't do this thing. Fascist, 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 fascist,
Although
fascist,
he's a Republican. He's a Republican on MSNBC.
Of course.
Because that's what
is there any other kind?
Right. MSNBC is the home for never Trump Republicans. It's ridiculous. I couldn't fight my way on there with the amount of weapons that Biden sends to Ukraine.
Ooh,
but conservatives can get on there just by saying, "Hey, I don't like Donald Trump."
Yeah.
So this is where we are, and I really, really, really wish people could keep their eyes on the ball.
All right, before we go, we wanted to quickly react to Pelosi's take on the raid of Mar-a-Lago. Let's watch.
I, as others, learned on my phone that had happened, so I don't know very much about it. But again, I'm sure that information will be revealed, and when it does, we'll find out what they were looking for. It seems to have something to do with presidential documents, but I really am not in a position to talk about it because all I know is what's in the public domain.
And that's generally...
Sure you do, Pelosi. Sure you do.
Okay.
What I've heard. from Democrats. I actually saw Bernie Sanders had a similar comment on either CNN or MSNBC last night. Probably CNN, that's what I was watching.
The people's skepticism of that is interesting to me. I do think it's kind of normal for these kinds of things to be kind of closely held, in part because you don't want it to get out.
Yeah, I don't know why. I don't necessarily think Nancy Pelosi would have known.
Yeah, that seems very plausible to me. Whether or not Joe Biden knew, I also don't think is implausible. If information comes out to the contrary, then we'll learn about it. But also,
I think Merrick Garland and Christopher Wray knew.
Yeah, but it also doesn't get to the bottom. Just because X, Y, or Z person knew didn't mean that it was necessarily politically motivated. So I think the jury's still out on that. We just have to find out what the basis of the warrant was and what was actually uncovered in the search.
All right, well, we'll have more Rising right after this.
I like it.
Yep.
You heard it here first. The Nooticing endorses the heel.
Hell yeah. And Jack of all asses.
If we share anything from the heel, we will up like we normally do for the liars.
Yeah, I actually, like I said, I do like that they at least try to bring in different voices. It's very heterodox. And the mainstream, like the main cast now at this point is essentially them. But Batya Ungar Sargon, I hope I didn't butcher her name.
Oh, you definitely did, but I know who you were talking about.
Batya, yeah. The wine's kicking in, man. No, Batya is regular. You have Matt Taibbi when he can show up. You have Katie Halper. And these are like leftist people, but then you also have
and Batya is really far left, from what I understand about her.
Yeah, kind of. Like I don't think she's as far as Brianna is. But regardless, they also bring in a lot of people from like the libertarian circle. You have like on Friday, oh, man, what is her name? I'm totally at a loss here. Emily.
Fox News host Jesse.
I'm gonna look it up.
Emily
Jasinski.
Lynch?
No, Emily Jashinsky. I'm going to say this, and it's going to sound like I'm like fucking got a mouthful of wet cotton. Emily Jashinsky. There it is. Fuck it, own it. Yeah, she's a like a more. She's definitely right leaning. You have Robbie, as you saw there, he's a libertarian. And they often bring in other conservative figures and things like that to offset the liberal element, or if you will. But it's worth noting that with people, when it comes to like Brianna, for example, there's a differentiation between the leftist and the liberal, which I kind of respect.
Yeah.
Because, I differentiate between progressive and neo-progressive.
Oh, well, I think that's important. Yeah.
Yeah, me
we should
too.
be differentiating between the two, because what is liberal is not.
Yeah, for sure. Well, unfortunately, though, what she considers liberal, I still would I would reject. But that's modern vernacular, I guess. That's common parlance at this point. Because when I think of liberalism, I think of freedom. And what she references is more like the centrist Democrat kind of thing, or a lot of leftists would say Democrats are right of center and all that shit. Obviously, well, maybe not obvious to the viewers. I actually reject this lateral dichotomy, this spectrum. I don't think that politics can cleanly be placed in a line from one end to the other. So with that in mind,
I would agree.
Yeah. And I think that the perpetuation of this dichotomy is to the advantage of the establishment. It's worth knowing too that our
it plays
modern
into that WWE theatrics that they do.
Absolutely. Like imagine a puppeteer where he has one puppet on one hand and one puppet on the other hand going to war. The viewer sees two things attacking each other, but in reality, it's the same person. And what's interesting, a lot of people don't know this, is that the modern concept of the right v left is actually a product of the French uh, Revolutionary War, essentially. Like they are they the French Revolution, where they presented the left and the right as very specific camps, which of course was very devastating, unfortunately. And
Of course, and when the revolution happened, they basically bankrupted France afterwards.
yeah, that was a whole thing. Um, people that were all like, "Yes, let's fight the powers," ended up finding themselves in the chopping block because they were no longer
They were the
politically
power that were
expedient.
being fought against.
Well, that and the people that wanted to maintain the power would be smart enough to redirect the ire towards the people who would contest their own power. And kind of, I feel like Trump is the worst example, only
He's a
because
pretty bad example about everything, really, though.
yeah, that's probably true. But only because what I'm referencing is somebody who's smart enough to recognize, okay, look, we're fighting the power. We defeat the power. Comes next. What comes next is somebody has to take the power. So I'm going to take the power. If I take the power and we're fighting the power and we're still in that paradigm, I'm going to die. So instead, you take the power and I'm going to guide everybody to eliminate anything that's going to interfere with what I think is best. That's where you create essentially the deep state. That's where you create the subliminal element here. And the false binary by itself inherently is designed to control people. The good guy good, bad guy bad. It's not complicated. It's not difficult.
Oh, I know some terrible
Um,
comics that have built careers on
so
it.
when we talk about left and right, modern use of left and right, a lot of people don't know that the origins do come from that revolution. And we often attribute these stereotypes in the modern world to those old that old socio-political paradigm. Um, but the problem is, this false binary is good for war, but it's not good for general functionality unless you're able to exploit both sides, create the illusion of choice, and then, utilize the results of that to your own benefit, and then create a nice coalition of people who all benefit as well.
The George Bush. I'm sorry. I've been drinking.
Yeah, me too. In any event, but nevertheless, it still stands. It's what it is. The false dichotomy is how the American people are controlled, and unfortunately, until we wake up to the fact that this isn't just theatrics, but now after all this time, all the hedge policies that they've used, going back to what I said earlier today. I was talking about, well, criticize Obama. Why is he doing this very dangerous, unconstitutional thing? Well, we can't challenge Obama because we have higher priorities, like making sure women can continue to get abortions, even though Obama could have, codified it, but whatever, right? Those kinds of hedge issues, marriage equality was back in the day, but we've got that for the time being. um Now abortion is, kind of been, they screwed the pooch on that one.
They sure did.
Maybe people will start waking up and realize that these hedge issues were always just carrots. Just carrots.
Well, I mean, I'm white peeled, so I believe that they will. Maybe I'm just white pilled though because I think it's inevitable. Social media, despite all it's trying, has been a boon for that sort of thing.
I think so too. I honestly, I think that they kind of overplayed their hand. Both parties have, and
Without doubt.
I'm kind of white pilled too in that regard. I'm actually honestly curious, and it also kind of concerns me because if you look at it from a macro perspective, right? The issue is if the general public has been so disillusioned at this point that they recognize the fucking game for what it is, and then they decide to go against it. Um, it might incentivize the people who control things to, you know, have another crisis.
Or at least we'll get a new story out of it so we can talk about something else in the next episode.
Oh, of that I'm certain. Trust me. Like, oh man, some of the stuff I've been studying and covering.
Well,
Uh,
we could go into CRT and the whole progressive thing, but I mean that's been
oh,
one that's been done to death, and two, we would be here until this time tomorrow morning.
yeah. Well, so that's the current project that I'm working on right now for the Substack, but that's not what I've been researching broadly. Actually, that's just old stuff. That's things that I've already researched and have really dug into over the last decade or so. No, the new stuff is more of a question of ESG. It's leaning more towards the whole Davos nonsense, the World Economic Forum, and how that ties in with what different countries are doing right now and the damages of it. Try looking up, for example, where the Dutch are with ESG, or with Pakistan, or Sri Lanka. There are revolutions all around the globe right now. Canada is picking it up too. It's only a matter of time, especially with how their authoritarian approach to the truckers.
Oh yeah, I saw a terrible meme about how supporting the truckers was a low IQ take. It's like Jesus, really? Wow.
Freedom is low IQ.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've seen
Embrace your
some brain
overlord.
dead takes before, but that one was something.
So yeah, I'm about to hop off, but before I do, I have to ask you a question. So it's a common trope to say that Justin Trudeau is actually like the love child of Castro.
Yeah.
Have you heard of that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I figured you did.
Oh yeah.
What do you think?
Well, he definitely looks a lot like him. I mean, I couldn't speak as to whether or not he is. I have no idea,
Well,
but they certainly
obviously.
look alike.
Yeah, well, I would say this. My understanding is that like Trudeau's mom was openly like banging the dude. And if they do look alike, and they definitely do look alike, there might be something to that.
There might be, but without a blood test, we'd never know. And to be honest, that makes me a little uncomfortable. We start testing blood.
Oh, I
I feel a little too progressive if we start doing that.
Now, if we start testing blood, it's only for the normal folk like us. It's not
okay.
it's not for the dictators.
Okay. Well, you hear that? Sorry. You heard that, Trudeau. You're safe.
Yeah, he's definitely safe. But I will say this: at what point, as a socialist, does he start demanding child support?
Well, I mean, can he do it when he's that old? Because if he does, I'd like to do that.
Well, I mean,
let me in on the secret, Trudeau.
Well, it's obviously a joke because you can't get like child support from a man who's dead.
Yeah.
But no, I don't know. Like yeah, it's it's a fun thing to play with, but regardless, it like kind of makes no difference to me. Like I see a lot of people who put emphasis on it. It's like, yeah, maybe he is, maybe he isn't.
If he
Doesn't
is, I
even
mean,
have
it doesn't change anything. You know what I mean? Then
exactly.
he's still a. I mean, I hesitate to say what I think about him, but we'll just end it on that.
We'll call him a penis potato.
That works as well as anything, I suppose.
Agreed. In any event, on that note, I gotta hop off. So it's been fun.
You as well, Jack. Take it easy. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, anywhere. Just search for the Nooticer. We're on TikTok, YouTube, Twitch. I mean, if it's a social media, search for the Nooticer.